Hey there guys, so today's video is going to be a fun one. Today I'm going to be ranking all of the Disney Colourpop palettes that I own in my collection. Now, I have 12 out of, I believe, 17 Colourpop palettes that have come out with Disney. I will tell you guys the ones that I don't own, but I do own 12 out of the 17. I don't own every single one. I probably should have collected all of them, but when the palettes came out that I wasn't really drawn to, I just didn't really want. There's definitely a couple that were not the greatest color story wise, so we're just going to go through the ones that I don't have really quickly. So I don't own all of the Disney Star Wars palettes. I own the most recent one, which is the Star Wars palette, like the classic Star Wars palette. And then I also own the Child palette, which is the first Star Wars palette that they came out with, which is from the Mandalorian series, and it's the Baby Yoda palette. I don't own two of the 9-pan palettes. I don't own the Mandalorian palette, which is the second one that they came out with, and the second one for the Mandalorian series. And I also don't own the Darth Vader palette. I just thought that the colors in the Star Wars palette were kind of giving me some Darth Vader vibes that I didn't really find having the Darth Vader palette necessary to own. So those are the two Star Wars ones that I don't have. I also don't own two of the 15-pan palettes. I don't own the Misunderstood Villains palette, which was the second collab that they came out with Disney. They came out with a whole bunch of products. I only own the highlighter and the lip gloss from Maleficent from that release. I don't own anything else from that series. I just thought that I really wouldn't use the palette all that much. It's very shimmer heavy. It's a beautiful palette, but I just didn't see the need for my preferences to buy that palette. And then the next one is the Mulan palette. Now this was the one I was probably the most drawn to pick up, but then as I looked at it some more and as I looked at the color story, I just decided to get other things from that release rather than getting the palette. It's such a beautiful palette, but I just didn't want to overwhelm myself at the time with more eyeshadow palettes. So I don't own that one. I do have the blush, the lipstick, and the highlight and the lip gloss from the collection. There was no highlighter in that collection. And then the last one is the Hocus Pocus 2 palettes. That's probably the worst color story they've ever done, honestly, for any Disney release. It just looks cheap and not well thought out whatsoever compared to the first Hocus Pocus collection. This one pales in comparison to the first one, so I don't own that one. So let's jump into the countdown without further ado. Sorry for my rambling. So let's start out with number 12. I think everyone guesses pretty much every time what is going to be on the bottom of my list pretty much anytime I do a Colourpop rankings video. But number 12 is the Colourpop Bambi palette. Now, I have nothing really to say about the collection itself. I think it's such an adorable collection, and I really think they made these palettes really cute, and they're honestly adorable. I love the packaging, and I love the whole layout of these palettes. I love how the cute design inside with Bambi. And I just think it's a really cute little palette. It's a really fun, easy to go palette. You could take this palette traveling and you probably wouldn't need anything else. Honestly, it's such an easy, compact palette to take anywhere. And I think that's a cute little perk about this collection and the collection of these palettes. But the thing that I suggest is that this, honestly, you do not get a bang for your buck with this palette compared to a 9-pan palette like the Tinkerbell palette or any of the other 9-pans that they release with Disney. This really is not a bang for your buck. It really is a very expensive, overpriced palette release for Colourpop. These went for $14 for 5 eyeshadows when, again, you can get a 9-pan from Colourpop for $16, so why would you spend the money on this? I really don't understand. They really should not have put mirrors in these palettes because, again, mirrors do up the cost of palettes. Same thing, that's why this palette was so expensive. I think they should have made it around $9 or $10. I think that it would have done way better. Again, the collection overall is adorable, and I thought that it was so cute, and I think the color stories of these palettes are adorable. I just love everything about the packaging. It's just so cute. Just as far as value goes, this is definitely the one you're getting the least value out of everything else I'm going to be talking about. And honestly, you can only get really one look out of this, and for me, I'm not like that everyday wear everyday wearer of the same palette every day. I know some people do that. They wear the same eyeshadows every day. I used to do that in high school, but now for me, as a having like, 70 plus palettes in my collection now, I need some variety, and this just doesn't give it to me. So that's why that one is on the bottom. But it's still a really cute palette. I don't dislike any of these palettes. I think the formulas of all these palettes are really good, actually. I think that for the Disney palettes, they do up the formula. And I think that usually I like the formulas way better in the Disney palettes than some of their other releases, because some of them aren't very good. Okay, so number 11, I've never really been that crazy about this palette. I know some people disagree with me, but honestly, it's the color story that I really don't love in this palette, but it is a really beautiful palette. So number 11 is the Disney Tinkerbell Sprinkle a Little Magic palette. I just find this color story in here very limiting. I mean, again, the packaging is beautiful. I love that Disney does design every single artwork for every single collection. They honestly are stunning design-wise. I mean, just everything. This one even comes with a mirror as well, and I think that this palette was only $16 compared to the Bambi palette, which was $14. So you get this giant mirror with really big panned eyeshadows. You get the huge eyeshadow pans in here. So I don't know why the Bambi palette was so much more expensive than this one. This one I think was only like $2 or $3 more. And you definitely get a lot more eyeshadows and a lot more variety in this palette. Just for me, I don't find that there's enough variety as far as it comes to the mattes in this palette. Honestly, they could have made these two shades like something more interesting. They could have made this like a yellowish blonde color for Bambi's, for Tinkerbell's hair, and then this color they could have made it. Honestly, if they would have just swapped this color out for like that yellowy shade, I probably would have liked the palette a lot more. I just find that when I use this palette, I need to go into another eyeshadow to deepen up looks, because unless you're doing a green look with this palette, like if you want to make it a more toned down look, like using the gold or like this brownish toned shimmer, let me just show you guys an up close of the palette. It's so beautiful, and the packaging again is so gorgeous. I think that this is one of my favorites packaging wise, because I love that they put Peter Pan, Wendy, and the rest of the Darling Boys in the background. I think that's beautiful. And then I love the sprinkle of pixie dust, and I love that, Tinkerbell is on the mirror. It's just, the attention to detail for this collection is beautiful. And the shimmers in here are gorgeous. The mattes are a little bit dry. They're kind of a little bit hard to blend, and the shimmers just flake a lot. But the shimmers are beautiful on your lid. Honestly, the shimmers in this palette make this palette worth it. And I know a lot of people really loved this palette, but for me, it just fell a little short, because if I have to reach into another palette, it's a little bit of a, con for me, because when you get a palette, you kind of want to use like all the eyeshadows in that certain palette. So that's the only reason why it kind of fell a little short for me. I mean, there are some palettes I'm going to mention in here that don't have as much depth and dimension as some others, but let's get real, Colourpop isn't really known for their depth and dimension, but this is a beautiful palette. I'm just saying, for me, it didn't really quite hit home for me. So that one is number 11. So, but I do love these little side collections they come out with, focusing on a certain character or animal. They're just so adorable. Like the Bambi one came out last spring, and then the Tinkerbell collection came out like June or July, I think last year, or like August. I think it was a summer release. And then the most recent spring launch that they had for Disney was Winnie the Pooh. So number 10 is going to be the Winnie the Pooh Sweet as Can Be eyeshadow palette. And the reason why this one's falling a little bit lower on the list is that I have absolutely nothing wrong with the color story in this palette. The packaging is freaking adorable, like so cute. I love that this is the first Disney palette that they came out with. I believe this is the first and only Disney palette that they did a 10-pan palette, which is adorable. And this is such an adorable color story, and I really, really like it for the springtime. It's a really easy, fun palette to use, and you can create really easy spring looks with this palette, and that's why I love it. I really do like this palette a lot. The formula in this palette is also really good. I think that the mattes blend beautifully. They're very pigmented, and I really like the mattes in here. And the metallics are very shimmery and beautiful. Very wet looking on the lid. I have absolutely nothing wrong with the formula in this palette. I think this is one of their better ones that has come out this year, because honestly, I've not been really that crazy about the releases for Colourpop this year, but this one I could not say no to, because hello, it's Winnie the Pooh. And I love that the inner graphic is different than the outside packaging. I just think that's so freaking cute. I love when they do that. The only reason why I'm putting this a little bit lower is that I did wear this recently, and what I've noticed is that these mattes don't last as long on me as some of the other palettes that I'm going to be mentioning. They kind of faded a little bit by the end of the day. Granted, I was wearing it for almost 7 or 8 hours, and I started to notice the fading around like 5 hours or so. So that's still a decent amount of wear time, but I'm just letting you guys know. And I did use the Anastasia eye primer, which is the one that I use for basically all of my eyeshadow palettes when I work, to really see how long it lasts. And that was the only thing. But I really love this palette. I think it's so cute, and I think it would add something really nice to your collection if you're looking for a new spring palette. This is adorable. So this was definitely my favorite one out of the 3 like side collections that they released. I just think it's adorable, and the collection overall, same thing with the Tinkerbell and the Bambi collection, are so cute. I don't know why they don't release more cheek products for like the bigger collections like Frozen, Lizzie McGuire, Star Wars. Like, where are the cheek products? Like, for all your popular collections, like, I don't know what they're doing. So, okay, so speaking of Frozen, number 9 is the Disney Elsa palette. Throwback now, because this one is actually, these are all still, as to my knowledge, I believe all the palettes that I'm talking about are still available on Colourpop's website. Even the Frozen 2 collection, which came out, I believe, in 2019, basically right after the movie came out. That's how long this collection has been available. Like, I'm really surprised. But yeah, all these other palettes that I'm mentioning are all still available, except for, I think, the Hocus Pocus palette, the first one. So this is the Elsa palette. And the reason why, the packaging on this is like, after the Midnight Masquerade collection, this is probably my favorite packaging they've ever done, is the Frozen collection. Oh my god, it's just so beautiful. And I was ecstatic when this collection came out. And honestly, this is one of the most different color stories they have ever done. And I do really love this palette. I love that this kind of steps me out of my comfort zone, and it is fun to create looks with this palette, but it is a little bit difficult for me to think about what I'm going to do with this palette. And that's the only reason why this one's ranking lower than the other palettes I'm going to mention, is that you only have these 2 red deepening shades in here. I wish that there was like maybe one other matte in here. The shimmers in here are stunning. The Northern Lights shade is a super shock, and it's a beautiful, like, shifty duochrome super shock. It's beautiful. The silver in here is one of my all-time favorites. Colourpop does silvers really beautifully. I'm going to have to compare the silver shades in some of these palettes, because I do have quite a bit of metallic silvers in some of the palettes. The only shade that I'm not really that crazy about is the shade Water. It's not really as pigmented as the 2 red shades in here. These are beautiful. These are really beautiful deepening burgundy shades. They're very pigmented. The purple is really pretty, and this one, Cuddle Close, is a gorgeous duochrome pink, and this purple is also really stunning. So again, I think that they nailed kind of the eyeshadow that Elsa wears in the movie. She kind of wears a little bit more deeper shades than Anna does, but as far as the two palettes go, this one is not as well loved by me as the Anna palette. I love the Anna palette. I think that Color Story is way better for my taste than this palette, but it's still a stunning collection. I really loved this palette at the time. I don't really use it as much anymore, but when this winter rolls around, I do love pulling out this palette. It's just a little bit harder to create looks with it, so that's the only reason why it's ranked a little bit lower. I do think that the shades are more pigmented in here than the Winnie the Pooh palette, and also because I love Frozen, so that's why it's ranked a little bit higher than the Winnie the Pooh palette. I really tried to separate my bias of the movies that I love more and the characters I love more, and I really looked at the color stories and what I love more as far as Color Story goes, but also it's a little bit harder to rank these because I'm also biased by certain characters, but I really tried my hardest to rank them as far as Color Story goes and wearability and what I reach for more. So this one is number 9. So that is the first 9 pan that actually it's the second 9 pan. So number 8 is another 9 pan palette, and number 8 is the first Star Wars palette I'm going to be talking about, and that is the Star Wars The Mandalorian The Child palette. I mean, how adorable is this packaging? Like, it's just so freaking cute. Like, oh my god, so cute. I was going to resist getting this palette, and then I ended up getting it, and I think that this is a really, really nice 9 pan palette that they created. It's honestly a really good color story. I really did not think I was going to use this palette as much as I did when it came out, but they really curated this palette beautifully. I just love this palette. It's really, really nice. I really love the depth of the green shades in here, but also you can go very neutral, and these two neutral mattes are really beautiful. I really don't find myself reaching for any other neutral shades. Maybe like just a base shade, but then I can use this to deepen it up, and this on the outer corners is such a beautiful deepening shade. And then I also love that you have this deep, dark, swampy green in here, so you can use that to deepen up any green look. And then these two greens are just so pretty. I love like this more minty color and then this more olivey green. So pretty. And then the shimmers are so stunning in this palette. They're so blinding. And I just loved my eyeshadow every time I used this palette. As you guys can see, this palette was well loved by me because, again, I could not put this down when I first got it. I used it all the time, and it really is a great palette. I love the mirror in here. I love the little baby Yoda on the packaging. It's just adorable. I love it. It really is the cutest in the galaxy, but it really is a solid palette. If you're looking for a good green palette from Colourpop, this is beautiful. So I love this palette. So again, I don't dislike any of these palettes. I'm a huge Disney fan, and I really wanted to share my thoughts on each of these palettes. I'm not going to swatch any of the palettes for you guys because we'll be here forever. So number 7 is, again, was a little bit tough to rank, but I ranked it this high because I do love this show. It was one of my favorites growing up, but also I love this color combo in this palette. It really is a great color combo. So number 7 is the Disney Lizzie McGuire What Dreams Are Made Of eyeshadow palettes. I was just ecstatic when they came out with this collection and with this release. I was really hoping that they do more Disney Channel collabs with Disney in the future. A lot of people really want a That's So Raven palette, but so far they've only done Lizzie McGuire so far, and this was really like based more focused on the movie. They also did incorporate quite a few shades named after the show, but there's also quite a few shades that were named after the movie. But What Dreams Are Made Of is the theme song of the Lizzie McGuire movie. I just love that the outer packaging is different from the inner packaging. I love when they do that. I think it's so cute, and I love the tie-dye in here. I did just talk about this palette in my favorite spring palettes, but I will mention it again because obviously it is a Disney palette. I really love the different color combos that you can create in here. I also really like that this is a really easy palette to use. It's a very easy spring summer palette to use. I love that you can mix the purples with the greens with the pinks. Like, these are all very complementary colors. And I thought that was just a really fun palette. So I really like this palette. Again, it does have a mirror in here as well. And it's so cute with the little character in it. You know, again, this just appeals to my nostalgia. And I could not say no to this release. I absolutely loved Lizzie McGuire growing up. I watched Lizzie McGuire, I think, every day after school. I just, you know, it really just hold a special place in my heart. And the shimmers in here are beautiful, and I think the mattes are really pretty. The only shade that I really don't love in this palette is the lime green shade. It's a little bit lackluster, but the rest of the palette is really, really pretty. The shimmers are very highly metallic, and the mattes, I love the purple and the pink, and they blend really, really nicely together. So, yeah, so that one is number 7. So, now let's get into the rest of the palettes. My top 6. So, let's just go ahead and go through those. They're just on the floor because I couldn't fit them on my, I couldn't fit all the palettes on my desk at the same time. So number 6 is the eyeshadow palette I'm wearing today, and it is the latest release that they came out with for Star Wars and for Disney in general. And number 6 is the Disney Colourpop Star Wars palette. They did a really amazing job with this palette and this release. I'm glad that they finally came out with, also the graphic on here is just awesome. Just they again nail it with the packaging. I mean, I know Disney pretty much designs every single palette for the Disney Colourpop launches, but they really do nail the packaging. It's just so cute, and it's just, again, this really appeals to my nostalgia. Whoops. That's the back. This is the front of the palette, and I do really like that I love when the inner packaging is different than the outer packaging. And some people were kind of disappointed that this graphic was not on the outside of the actual palette. But I actually really like this because this reminds me of the intro of the movie when Star Wars splashes on the screen with the start of the score of the movie. Like, I love it. So, also, I am wearing a bunch of products from previous Disney Colourpop launches. I'm wearing this eyeshadow palette on my eyes today. And then for my cheeks, I'm wearing the Midnight Masquerade Enchanted Rose Belle Blush. And then I'm also wearing the Midnight Masquerade highlighter in Coronation, which is Aurora's highlighter. And then for my lipstick, I'm wearing the first Disney lipstick that I ever got, which is from the first collection. This is the Disney Designer Collection Princess Collection, and this is the Ariel lipstick. I love this color. And then I'm wearing the Bambi lip gloss in Thumper over top. And then I'm also wearing the Bambi eyeliner on my waterline, which is the shade Meadow. So I wanted to wear a bunch of the Disney launches today. So I'm wearing the Star Wars, the Bambi, the Midnight Masquerade, and the It's a Princess thing. So wanted to wear a variety of products today for you guys. And I love all of these products. The Midnight Masquerade is my all-time favorite launch from them. I wear them all the time, but we'll get into that soon. So yeah, number 6 is the Star Wars palette, and I'll tell you the shades that I'm wearing on my eyes today. So I took the shade Starfighter in my crease, and I darkened up the crease more with Republic, and then I used First Mate on the outer corners, and then I used the shade Galactic Empire on my lid, and then I just threw New Hope on my inner corners, and that's all I have on my eyes today. I love that they made this a 15 pan palette. I love that they finally came out with a classic Star Wars palette because everybody has pretty much been begging them to come out with a Star Wars collection. And I think that they did a really great job with this color story. I think that this, honestly, I could see multiple different color stories with this palette, and that's why I think that they created this really well. You could honestly break it up into 2 9-pans. Like, this could be a really beautiful 9-pan palette, or you could also cover up this side. And this would also be a really beautiful 9-pan palette. So I think they did a great job. I love that they put blues and reds in here. I kind of wish they didn't put so many neutral shades in here. I think that they could have taken 2 of them out of here and maybe replaced them with some greens, because we do have a green lightsaber in Star Wars as well. They did represent the red and the blue lightsaber, but we also need the green for the Jedi to be represented when Luke becomes a full Jedi and he uses the green lightsaber. But overall, I really love the different finishes of shimmers that they put in here. They put 3 Super Shock shadows, which 2 of these are the tie-dye finished Super Shock shadows, and then the other one is a regular Super Shock. And then these metallics are very highly metallic and beautiful. I really like this shade that I'm wearing today. This is the first time I'm wearing it. I haven't worn every single metallic in here, but since I'm so familiar with Colourpop's formula, I pretty much know what I'm going to think of the shades. I've tested out all the mattes in here, and I've worn 6 out of the 8 shimmers. The only 2 I haven't worn is Rebel Princess and Kessel Rum, but this silver is so highly metallic. I love this turquoise blue, just so pretty. And the gold and the silver are stunning. The gold on my inner corners is just so highly metallic and beautiful. And then the mattes are blending really well, and the matte black in here is actually really amazing. Sorry, my throat's getting a little dry. But this black shade is actually very highly pigmented and blends beautifully. So yeah, I thought that they nailed this color story. I'm glad that they finally came out with a Star Wars collection, and I'm sure this is not going to be the last. There's definitely probably going to be more Star Wars palettes and collections coming our way, probably this year or next year. So, but yeah, so that is, let's stop rambling about this palette, because I've spent quite a bit of time talking about that one. So that one is number 6. So now let's get into our top 5. My top 5 favorite Disney palettes that Colourpop has ever released. So number 5, yeah, I believe all of these are still available except for the Hocus Pocus palette, which we will get into very soon. So number 5 really shocked me on how high this palette ended up being on my list, but the more and more I think about how good this palette is, formula wise, it's so good. The color story might not be everybody's favorite, but honestly I think it works really, really well. So number 5 is the Disney Nightmare Before Christmas palette. I think that they did a really amazing job with this release and with this palette. It's so crazy because at first I really did not love this color story. When they came out with it, I'm like, this really does not scream Nightmare Before Christmas to me. But again, the more and more I used this palette, the more and more I really, really liked it. The mattes in here are just so good and blend so well and are very pigmented. I love the black in here. I love like that they went with cooler tone mattes in this palette rather than just a bunch of neutral shades with some pinks and oranges. I love that these are deeper gray tones. It's just so pretty. This zero shade is why I loved Colourpop's metallics. This is so highly pigmented and beautiful, and the shade Pumpkin Patch is so highly pigmented and beautiful as well. I love pink and gray together. Also, orange and gray looks beautiful. This purple looks beautiful with these grays. It's just a really pretty palette. I do wish that they would have put, you know, some type of green or blue in here for Sally or Oogie Boogie. But when you think of this palette and the color story in general, they really did a great job with the cohesiveness of this palette. It's definitely one of the most cohesive Disney palettes they've ever done. So I think that with this, it worked. With the Hocus Pocus 2 palette, it did not, but this one is definitely a really, really pretty, fun, very unique Disney color story. And I really, really liked it. And I love like the graphics in here. But again, I was really impressed with the formula of this palette. It's definitely one of their best formula-wise. And I think it does capture the movie really well for Nightmare Before Christmas. I just don't know why Colourpop is so afraid to do green. I mean, the only palette they really did green in was Tinkerbell. And they did put some muted metallic greens in the Winnie the Pooh palette. But if there was matte green in this, or like a neon green, or like a shimmery green in the Star Wars palette, I feel like people would have loved that a little bit more. But as far as the color story goes, I think it's better in this palette, but I like the formula a lot more in this palette. So these two were very hard to rank, but I really like both of these. So that one is number 5. I just didn't think it would fall so high on my list. Okay, number 4. I'm really not into Hocus Pocus as much as the next girl is. I'm not like completely obsessed with it. I can appreciate it though, and I do end up watching it almost every year now, at least once. I don't know how people watch it over and over and over again. For me, I can watch it once every Halloween and I'm good. So number 4 is the Disney Hocus Pocus Gather Around Sisters palette. Just everything about the packaging is just so fun and so well thought out. And again, I love that the inner packaging is different than the outer packaging. I just love when they do that. And then this is the Gather Around Sisters palette. And then when you open it up, it does have the 3 sisters on the top. And I love that there's no mirror, because I love when they do like these designs in the palette. It's just so much better. So this is the Hocus Pocus Gather Around Sisters palette, and I just love the combinations of colors in here. This is one of my most used Disney Colourpop palettes. I just love my looks every single time I use this. I think that they really created this one very well as well. I love this top row of warm neutral shades. You guys know this is like my home. I love the greens, the pinks, the reds. I love the cooler tone neutrals. And I've said this again and again and again. I really feel like this is a palette that all the Sanderson sisters would wear. I know some people are like, oh, it's so muted and boring. But honestly, what else did you see the Sanderson sisters wearing besides muted smoky eyes? Because that was like the style at the time that the palette came out. And also, honestly, I wouldn't really do any other colors for them, because it really did work for the mood and the vibe of the movie. So I love this palette. I think it's really pretty. This was probably their most popular Disney collection. The release was an absolute mess for them, but then they never restocked it, which was a little bit messed up. But overall, the packaging, everything, the color story, I really do like this palette a lot. The metallics in here are gorgeous. I love this Brew Potion shade, and the mattes are nice. They're not my absolute favorite mattes that they've ever done. They're a little bit dry, but they are pigmented and they last a long time. They're just a little bit harder to get on the eyes, but once I have this on my eyes, I really do love my makeup. So this one is shockingly very high, but I have everything I could possibly need in this palette. I love that there's also a matte brow bone highlight in here, so that definitely does shoot it up my list, because when I use this palette, I don't have to dip into anything else. So really cohesive, well thought out color story for they really did nail that one. Okay, number 3, my favorite 9-pan Disney palette is the Disney Frozen 2 Anna palette. I just love this color story. It's just one of my favorites. This is, like I said, my favorite 9-pan that they've ever done. I just love the color story in here. It just is a really beautiful, well thought out color story. I love the warmer neutrals in here. It's just so pretty. It's such a pretty palette. This was definitely one of my most used palettes as well. I mean, it doesn't really look like it, but I used this palette a ton when it came out. I don't use it as much anymore, but I really think that they just curated these Frozen palettes to be really colors that the Disney princesses would wear in the movie. And also, I'm a sucker for yellow gold, so I absolutely love this yellow gold shade in here. This purple is so pretty, and I just love that they really put mattes in here that go so well with the shimmers in here. I love how there's more mattes than shimmers in this one as compared to the Elsa one. I love this matte purple shade. This is actually a really beautiful purple, and purples are usually really hard to do for brands, because purples are very hard to formulate. They can be really dry or patchy, and that one is gorgeous. I also love the pressed glitter in here. It's stunning. And I love that there's a deepening brown in here. You guys know that really shoots it up my list, but this is just a gorgeous palette. I really love it. I have absolutely nothing to say about the formula. It's stunning. I just think that this is such a beautiful palette, and again, the packaging is so adorable, and Frozen 2 is one of my absolute favorite Disney movies. So I love the music in Frozen 2 even more than Frozen 1. Frozen 1, the movie, is better than Frozen 2, but the music in Frozen 2 is where it's at. It's amazing. So that one is number 3. So now let's get into the top 2, and you guys can probably guess what my favorite Disney palettes are. I'll give you a hint. They're both 15 pan palettes, and they're both princess palettes. So there you go. I pretty much gave it away. If you guys can remember these palettes, I mean, this was their first palette they ever came out with Disney. I don't know why this packaging is failing me right now. For some reason, I can't get it tucked back in. There we go. So number 2 is the Disney It's a Princess Thing Disney Designer Collection palette. This is an old palette, so if you guys didn't remember this one, I understand, but this one is number 2 because I just absolutely loved this palette. It is very well loved by me, as you guys can see. I used this a ton. This was like, I think, my 5th Colourpop palette in my collection. I think I got Dream Street, Zodiac, and Sweet Talk. Maybe, actually, I think this was my 4th one. And it's still one of my all-time favorite Disney palettes they ever did. The metallics in here are just so highly metallic and beautiful. I love these mattes in here, and I love that you have deepening mattes on the bottom, like the brown and the black. I'm sorry about the gold packaging. It's going to reflect a little bit on my light, so I'm sorry about that. But it's just so beautiful. I think that they curated this palette beautifully. They have pretty much 2 shades for every single princess that was in this palette. Like, we have a Boo and Magic Carpet for Jasmine. We have Chip. What is it? Chip, Enchanted Rose, and Beast for Belle. Like 2 or 3 shades for every princess. We have Thingamabob and Triton for Ariel, like, etc. Just the metallics in here are some of the most highly metallic shimmers I've ever used from Colourpop. I was obsessed with these at the time. They were some of the most highly foiled metallics that I had tried, because this was like one of the first Colourpop palettes I ever tried, and they were honestly way better than like Too Faced and Urban Decay, and they were like a fraction of the price. This gold, this silver, and Ray and Prince Charming, I would use the hell out of those shimmers. I would use them all the time. And then I love that there's like these purpley shimmers, and I think the purples go really well with the neutrals in here. I just love this palette. It's so beautiful. So yeah, and also they put this shade Magic Carpet in here because they wanted more purple in the palette. And also they needed another shade for Jasmine. So this was one of the last shades that was added. It was really cool to find that out. But yeah, this palette is beautiful. I love the mattes in here. They blend beautifully. I love the deepening shades, but the metallics are really where it's at in this palette. Just the formula is phenomenal, and I love the princesses that they chose. They did Cinderella, Snow White, Jasmine, Belle, Ariel, and Tiana. So just gorgeous. I loved this collection as a whole. They did like super shocks for each princess, and they also did lipsticks for each princess. So I have a couple of the lipsticks as well. I just wish they did cheek products for it, but they did do cheek products for this last collection, and this is my all-time favorite collection that they've ever done for Disney. And honestly, this one just has not been beaten yet from any other of the other new palettes. So number one, since I did say what was my all-time favorite Disney release earlier in this video, you can probably guess which palette this is. So number one is the Disney Midnight Masquerade collection. This one also falls pretty high on my list of all my Colourpop palettes that I counted down, I think, a couple of months ago, if you guys want to check that out. But yeah, just the packaging, everything about this collection was just so gorgeous, and I just love this palette. I mean, it's just so pretty. And what's so funny is that I was not going to get this palette when it came out. I was going to get a bunch of the other things that came out in this collection. But then I was like, fine, I'll get the palette. And then it ends up becoming my favorite Disney palette they've ever done. So yeah, I love the muted mattes in here. They pretty much go with everything. I thought for a second I had pan on that shade. But I don't. I love that there's, you know, really good variety of mattes in this palette, but there's also a great variety of shimmers in here. I love that you have these light mattes up here, but then you have this whole row of deepening mattes in here, and they're all just so beautiful. You can take this palette in so many different directions. You can create such beautiful looks. And then, of course, the metallics in here are stunning. I love the gold. You guys know, again, I'm a sucker for yellow gold. So that one is Mrs. Potts, and it's so dang beautiful. I also love this matte blue, which is Merryweather. I love that Aurora was represented in this palette. That's also why I'm a little bit biased about this, is that Sleeping Beauty is my all-time favorite Disney princess. I'm just moving my phone. And then I also really love the pressed glitters in here. These are actually really beautiful. I've used them for like a ton of looks that I've done with this palette for like collab looks and stuff. I love using it as like kind of like a liner, and they are like really beautiful, like very piecey glitters, and they're just so pretty. They look like crystal ornaments on your eyes. They're so gorgeous. So that one is Royal Ball and Floating Lantern, and this one's for Cinderella, and this one is for Tangled. I love that Tangled is represented in this palette, and we have Floating Lantern and New Dream. And then we also have Enchanted in here, which is awesome. We have Pip and Damsel and Enchanted. No, wait, Pip and Enchanted, sorry. And then they also used Meg in here, which Hercules is one of my all-time favorite Disney movies as well. And they did Nutmeg and Damsel. But I just love this row of mattes. I love this orange, this pink, the red, Gaston, and Mrs. Potts. Oh my god, so pretty. I love Beauty and the Beast as well. And they also put Tiana in this one as well. And they did Frog and Wife and Mama Odie. Oh my god, both of these shimmers are so freaking stunning on the lid and on the inner corners. Oh, so gorgeous. And then Spinning Wheel for Aurora. Such a gorgeous duochrome. I just love everything about this palette. They only did Royal Ball for Cinderella in this palette, but they did 2 shades for her in the first palette that I showed you guys, the It's a Princess Thing palette. And then they also represented Esmeralda, and they did Quasimodo. I thought they did another shade for her. Dolgy, which is this beautiful peach metallic. So absolutely love everything about this collection, the packaging, the color selection, and I've used the hell out of this palette. I love it so damn much, and that's why it's always going to be my number one unless they blow my socks off with another Disney release. This has not been able to be topped for me. So yeah, I love it. I also love the packaging of this palette. I love the like wait, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The octagon shape of this palette is just gorgeous. And I loved the blushes, the highlights, the lipsticks in this collection. It was just really a beautiful, full, well thought out collection. And the packaging is pretty much inspired by Cinderella's like fairy dust that comes off of the carriage and what the fairy godmother uses. And it's just so beautiful. I love it. So that's why this is my number one. And yeah, that is pretty much it, you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on my Instagram at CBW819 and check out my Poshmark at the same handle. Please let me know what your favorite Disney Colourpop palette is. Let me know if you could even care less about Disney Colourpop palettes or if you're even a Disney fan in general. I really would love to know if you've tried any of these palettes. Leave it in the comments below, please. Or let me know if you want me to use any of these palettes in a future video. But I have videos with all of these palettes and first impressions on all of these palettes. So if you just search my channel, you guys can check out all the looks that I've done with all of these palettes. But yeah, I'm not going to be stopping collecting Disney palettes anytime soon. I might add those other palettes to my collection in the future, but probably not. Because, again, I have quite a bit. So, yeah, I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye.